Um, all right, welcome back to Chief Women Arise talk show. Today we're going to talk a little bit about birthing and how the generations can actually help us in birthing. So, a lot of times when I talk on the show or talk with other women that I know are older, they say, well, it's been a really long time, so what can I add to that conversation? But there's a lot because even just, for example, I was at a postpartum visit last night, and the mother, or the grandmother, I should say, of the baby made this smoothie for the mother. And she was asking me if it was okay to give to the daughter, and I said, or to her daughter, and I said, well, I mean, I'm sure. What's in it? And she told me what was in it, and I said, well, I've never really heard of that, but is it something that culturally, because they're Cuban, culturally that you gave to mothers when they had their babies? And she said, yeah, it is. Okay. And I said, well, exactly. So it's fine, it's safe, because these are generational things that have come down for generations and generations, hundreds of years. And I think we shouldn't discount these sorts of things and the wisdom that older women can bring to the younger generation of today. And, I would just really, first of all, encourage young women to be talking to their mothers and their grandmothers and even their great-grandmothers about their births. And, what did they feel like helped them, and what did they feel like hurt them in that birth process? What would they have done differently this time versus next time? Having those sorts of conversations, with their elders versus, just them telling their birth story and then maybe having a negative connotation to it that they think, well, I don't think I can do this, right? But really having more of that dialogue, they can learn so much from the elders that they're really not having these conversations. They feel like maybe it's awkward or it's outdated. Birth has changed so much. Well, yeah, birth has changed so much, but there's still so much relevance today to what how women birthed, even 60 years ago. And a lot of times it was still in the hospital. And so we can have these conversations and really glean from this advice that older women have. But one thing I would say also is that there's just not enough education out there. Girls in public schools are not getting the education that they need to understand their bodies, to understand what their bodies are supposed to do, what is normal, what is not normal, and even really what is normal. I mean, I had a woman in my girls' workshop one time that said, I didn't get my period until I was 19. And people thought that there was something wrong with me. I kind of started thinking there was something wrong with me. I went to the doctor, and the doctor said there was something wrong with me. But there was nothing wrong with me at all. I was just an active teen, and it didn't happen until I was 19 years old. And so, we put these stereotypes on women, and then they start to get this complex about themselves, like the self-image that you've been talking about, Pastor Sharon. And it's just not good for us to take that away and feel like that we don't have self-worth, right? And so, first of all, I want to encourage the audience, if you're listening today and you know a pregnant woman, or you are pregnant, or you're thinking about pregnancy, reach out and get the education that is needed. Understand what our medical system is today. It's changed so much. And Shayna, you could attest to how in the medical system today, there's so many women that are not getting the care that they need. Correct. Especially the underprivileged, those who are women of color. They are not treated the same way in hospitals as they are white counterparts. It's unfair. And I know that there are women who are not on Medicaid and they see that there are benefits to Medicaid, but there's also not benefits to Medicaid. For example, a woman who's on Medicaid could possibly get a doula without any out-of-pocket cost. That's wonderful. That's great that they're able to get that support and be able to understand the whole childbirth process and their rights and what they can do in childbirth. But at the same time, on the other flip side, they can't really go and have a home birth without paying out of pocket.
Right.
Sometimes that's $1,000, sometimes it's $7,000 out of pocket, even with Medicaid, because a midwife is going to charge a administrative fee on top.
Right.
You know, and so we can't expect that, you know, there's going to be equal care.
Right.
And, you know, is universal health care really something that we need in this country? I would really actually open that up to the panel here.
You gave a lot of information there.
I did.
So many wheels was going.
Yeah.
Definitely education, definitely talking to the older women. I remember when I had my daughter, it's so funny. I was so young, and for 2 weeks, I just washed her up with soap and water. I didn't know how to bathe a newborn. I had to call my friend and ask her to show me how to bathe a newborn because I just didn't know.
And were you embarrassed by that?
Very, because I was like, this is not a doll. This is a human being.
Right.
And I didn't want to, you know, I was a little scared. And then things like I tell a lot of these young mothers, you don't have to go out and buy all these expensive toys. Like that 1-year-old will be happy with a pot and a spoon and banging on it.
Yes.
You know, just little things like that, like, you know, or buying all of these newborn clothes for what, you know.
For a few weeks.
Right.
Right.
You know, so just sharing, we have to create communities to share information. But I like what you said about the cultural thing. One thing too, sometimes in a hospital setting, some women from different cultures, they might not allow certain things in the birthing room because that's not culturally accepted, let's say the United States, but somewhere else, this is what we do.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, maybe like religious beliefs or circumcision will be one. You know, some babies, you know, in a Jewish culture, they got to be so many days, right? Or again, maybe not all. Maybe in other cultures, women still stand up to have their babies. They stand up and squat. Where in the hospital setting, that's not a this. Well, I never seen that. That's not encouraged.
You've never seen
It's
that?
not encouraged. Yeah.
It's not encouraged in the hospital. They want you in a supine position. Yeah. So those are, but culturally, also in other countries, breastfeeding is very, in other, I think our culture might be the least with the breastfeeding, but other cultures, which is encouraged. We definitely encourage it. But it might be some things where a woman is from a country and she's breastfeeding, but no men need to be in the room because that's not culturally accepted. So those kind of conversations are important because, and then again, if who am I to say you can't, a man's going to be in here, you know, that's violating her cultural rights, that's violating her, you know, and so again, being able to talk about these things and be sensitive to these things because again, if that woman is here from another country, she's on Medicaid, she has to be in the hospital and she has to be treated, but her doctor might be a male or the nurse might be a male and she needs to breastfeed and, you know, again, culturally that's not accepted. So these type of conversations, we have to, but we want to encourage that because if that is part of her culture, and a man is not supposed to be present because her breasts are exposed, then let's respect that.
That's right.
Let's respect, that's a cultural thing.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. But do you think that there should be universal health care? That's a loaded question.
That's
Right.
getting a little. That's political. That's a political question because universal healthcare. So I got to ask you: are you talking about more of a socialistic healthcare, most like healthcare across the board for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know,
that's one of those questions.
should that person of color, should that woman of color be able to have the same type of birth experience as that person, as her white counterpart?
Well, yeah.
And does that really have to do with the healthcare system or lots of different factors?
So what you're talking about is two separate issues because
Yeah.
that's called racial disparities.
Yes.
So that is different from universal health care.
Yeah.
Two different because universal health care means it's across the board the same type of care for everybody. We have friends in other countries that have the socialistic health care. For some people it's great, others it hurts because socialistic health care means okay, you're going to have a certain amount of money a year and once you want out, that's it. Or you're not going to be able to, you know, so then you really might, even in a universal or socialistic healthcare, there's still going to be disparities.
Yeah, absolutely.
If that makes sense,
Right.
because, for example, like if you go to England or Canada, you get an allotment per year for medical expenses. And let's say you're diagnosed with cancer and you need that's a whole different subject, but you need all this or rare disease or like lupus and your medicine is $1,000 a pill. In some if you have it across the board, it's going to be cracked. So it's really not a perfect healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
Ours is capitalistic. Ours is a private sector. We have privatized insurance. We have insurance provided by the government. So Medicaid is state health insurance. Medicare is federal. So now you're talking about how the dollars flow through the community. So it's, you know, this topic is a bigger system, and this is one really beyond our table to have more of the politicians, the doctors, the insurance carriers, because you need all of these people at the table to really have that conversation. But getting back to what you're talking about, I like the thing that you talked about, the cultural things. Like sometimes there's things that's too big. But let's talk about, well, what can we do? We can advocate absolutely. For our sister who, for example, a lot of hospitals, I know in the African American community, and I'm not going to say I'm just going to say families, this is not a black or white thing. Sometimes there's been birthing experience, the whole family want to be in a room. You want to have 20 people in a room. And the hospital's like, no, you only can have one or two. Well, culturally, that's not acceptable for us, and that's not a black or white thing. That's just
Latinos,
cultural.
Asians,
right?
All of the cultures are that way because the family is so important. And
correct.
They do family events together.
Correct.
And so,
And the birthing experience is a part of a family thing. So being able to advocate for, well, hey, we can't. It's many times even as a nurse. Okay, everybody can't be in a room. But what can I do to accommodate you? Let me put an area out here in the waiting room and so everybody can be here. We'll have one person come in at a time. And when the mom is able to, we'll have her and baby join you out here. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So those are, I try to think of things, what can we do now?
You do FaceTime.
Right.
There are other options, nowadays, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But you do have to have, I understand the hospitals, you have to have the health of the mom and the baby as a priority.
Right.
And when you get so many people in the room, I can remember helping some of my kids when they were going through the birthing process. There was so many people in the room that it overwhelmed the mother going through labor.
Yes.
Right.
And at that point, you've got to make a choice.
Correct.
But I like what you said, Naomi, about the older generation helping the younger. And I was involved in all of my kids and a lot of my grandkids, when they were born. And it was rewarding for me, even though nowadays they have all these different rules and regulations, and this is good and that's good and all of that. But still, when they go through it, like when they go into labor and they don't have a doula, who are they going to call to find out, am I really in labor? When do I call the doctor? What do I do?
Mama.
Yeah, you call mama, right? And you ask mom, okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
And you walk that through with them. So things like that, bathing the baby. You mentioned that.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's not really
member.
always an option, though, Sharon, because what if their mother and their grandmother all had cesareans and never even went into labor?
Right.
How are they going to know what labor is really like?
Right.
Yeah.
If-
Or they adopted their kids, and
Right.
now their adopted child is having a baby.
Sure.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots
Yeah.
of things.
Mhm.
So,
There's a lot
you know,
of things.
just getting that proper education really makes such a difference.
Yeah.
I think for me, having the generations around really helped me not be as scared my first time.
Yeah.
Because I was diagnosed with lupus dealing with it at that time. I would get so much negative from the doctor. So just going to talk to my mom, going to talk to my aunt, it was kind of refreshing to hear, you know, it's going to be all right. And then knowing they're women of faith, it kind of gave me a courage, you know, I can get through this. And then, you know, once you watch movies and they show you all this stuff you got to go through, like when your water gonna break, and then you realize it's not really like how it is on the movies.
Right.
Like, you know, you can talk through it with people
Right.
from a more realistic perspective. And I know for me that brought me comfort.
Right.
And then on the point when you guys were talking about, you know, those bigger issues, I know me and Pastor Wise were at a conference, and it was a lady there that had a work on both sides of medicine and Medicaid. And one thing she just told us, as women, as mothers, as leaders, just to know what's available to you.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of times where we assume things are available based on whatever insurance we have, or maybe even the hospital.
Right.
But like you were saying, different hospitals have different policies.
Mm-hmm.
So the more we're educated on what our insurance can cover, you know, what's available, then I believe that we can use our voice to make better decisions in birthing, like we talked about last time, like using that voice. So I think education also brings forth that security. And some of that education might be culturally.
Right.
You might say, well, you guys did that and it worked for years, so maybe I might try that. Or now you have a lot of people not wanting to get epidurals.
Right.
So, you know, being able to talk through those things, you know, based on your desires with the people around you, I think that really helps, especially when it's your first birth.
Right. And you know, Naomi, when they were having that formula shortage, I told them, girls, you better whip that breast out and breastfeed your baby. It's free. You know? So, you know, that happened,
But
and
that's
that could happen again.
Yeah, but I mean, we'll talk about that next time because
Yeah.
I do want to cover postpartum and
Yeah.
breastfeeding because, I mean, there's lots of women who think they can't
Yeah.
if they haven't been breastfeeding
Right.
or they have to stop for some reason. But, you know, I just would encourage the ladies out there to get information, and don't get it from social media per se.
Yes.
You know, make sure that you're getting it from reliable sources.
Yes.
And if you don't know, you know, click the subscribe button
Yes.
and catch us next time on Chief Women Arise.